Hey everybody, welcome to another great episode. We've got the honor of having James Masotti. He is the owner of Our Team Accounting, and he's going to be sharing with us all types of, things financial, how do you get your finances in place and grow your business. Welcome here, James. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing, Eric?
Doing awesome. Yeah, really looking forward to this interview and, picking your brain a little bit on financial side of a business because it's so important, but a lot of business owners don't really have a financial background. So it's, there's a lot that goes into it. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and the company and kind of the work you do?
Yeah, sure. So I have a bit of a non-traditional background as the owner of an accounting firm. I spent 15 years in corporate doing supply chain operations, kind of going to the executive levels. At the last company I was with was a $300 million private equity owned company. And I led the supply chain organization there. It was a 60-person organization across 2 different manufacturing sites. But I was also a real estate investor and I started a property management company. And kind of through a lot of that, one of the things that I really learned was that my passion was for kind of coaching and mentoring other folks. And whether that was through my experience doing a lot of like technology implementation. A lot of the companies and situations that I went into throughout my career was, some sort of like a turnaround, whether it was a cultural turnaround, needing to change systems, processes, things along those lines. And with all of that, kind of the coaching and mentoring my team, not only through their career, but also, again, getting them into real estate investing or helping other real estate investors. And then I'm also a bowling coach. And so that's just kind of a theme that always came around. And so I acquired Our Team Accounting a year ago in April of 2023 and became a profit first professional, which we'll talk a little bit more about, I think. And really for me, what that really came to was like the idea that in my real estate experience, I saw a lot of contractors that, if anybody's read the E-Myth Revisited, it's that idea of like working in the business versus on the business, or there's the Profit First for Contractors. Author Sean Van Dyke calls it the craftsman cycle. And it's this idea of, your craft and your trade really well, but you don't know how to run the business, right? And so it's, when do I bring in the technologies and the processes and the people and all of that sort of stuff that allow me to scale my business and all of that. And so I really saw a need to help folks in a lot of small businesses. They may or may not have systems and data, but everybody has financial data. And so it was a way of being like, okay, the Profit First system gives us a real easy, simple way of being able to help coach people to understand what's going on in their business, tracking, numbers that are going to help them ultimately be successful, and then, grow the business or run the business the way that they want to kind of achieve their goals. So that's kind of where I come from. So I've got we're a fully remote business, and I've got a team of 6 folks that do all of the actual accounting for my clients. So I've taken accounting classes, but you don't want me doing your double entry bookkeeping kind of a deal. But when it comes to interpreting that financial data in terms of business insights, I've been doing that for years.
Yeah, great distinction there between, you don't need to be an accountant and know bookkeeping and accounting inside and out to be able to use the data and know how to make business decisions based off of that. So, but yeah, great, background experience, profit first. Love the system because it's quite easy to understand and implement, and the impact and results are, just really far reaching, and it's just a great system to manage finances. We had talked earlier, and you mentioned something interesting where business owners generally, like starting out or, till they reach, higher levels of revenue, that being able to read a profit and loss statement or some of your financial statements actually aren't, totally crucial, that there's actually other numbers and key metrics that they should be looking at and have better understanding of. Could you kind of explain your thought process and like what some of those key numbers are?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the interesting things for me, right, is I even struggled with this back in my corporate life, right? I'm sorry, I'm going to take my glasses off. I don't need those right now. For, like this whole idea of like, accrual accounting or being able to read your financial statements, for a lot of small business owners, it doesn't actually reflect the lifeblood of a small business, which is cash running through their business, right? There's a lot of the ways that cash moves around on the profit and loss or on the balance sheet and the timing of things and all of that sort of stuff that just it doesn't resonate with a business owner who, at the end of the year, their tax person says, hey, here's what your net income is, and here's how much taxes you owe as a result of, these things. And, the business owners are just kind of left scratching their head going where'd all the money go, So the metrics that I really like having people focus on, and that make most sense even to me as a business owner, right, are things that are directly tied to, where is my cash going? Because, 50% of businesses don't survive to 5 years. And of those businesses, over 85% of them, go out of business because of cash management issues, right? So, when you see statistics like that, clearly just that lack of understanding around where's the money is the biggest thing. So, the things that I really like to, focus a lot on with folks is one, understanding the owner, especially if we're talking like smaller enterprise where the owner is still somehow involved in the business, is properly allocating their wages. And what I mean by that is not in the traditional accounting sense of like, oh, what's W-2 versus a distribution or whatever, but actually being able to go through and like classify like what are all the different jobs that you do, all the different hats that you wear as the owner, right? What are you doing on the tools? You're the salesperson, you're the marketing person, you're also the CEO. Well, all of those come with different pay rates, like if you had to go to market to replace those. And so few people don't properly put that into their pricing, for example, right? So, one is just looking at, how are they building what do their margins look like and getting them to actually build out their pricing correctly, which leads then also like into their job costing. Like a lot of times people don't actually have good job costing or don't do it at all. Or if they do, they're only looking at their direct costs and they don't have a process for allocating their indirect overhead expenses, into projects as well to make sure that they're getting that proper markup in there to drive the margins that they ultimately want to have. So again, kind of that job cost, starting from like their wages, which is usually one of the biggest pieces, the kind of the overhead and looking at that. Another one would be their client acquisition cost. A lot of, small businesses just don't have an understanding of what it takes to scale. So again, when we're talking about cash, a lot of times, whether it's through, your own sweat equity, or if you're putting money into some sort of, marketing system, whether that's a networking referral system or digital marketing or whatever it might be, you have to put money out before you get money in, right? And so knowing how much that is, and then what the time frame is to get that return, you have to have cash available to cycle through. And so, when you have that cash that you can dump fuel on the fire, that's great. But if you don't, then trying to grow can actually be what bleeds you dry. And so I think that's a critical number, both in terms of what is the actual number to the client acquisition cost, but also what's that time frame for getting that money back into your business. And then just the other one that I see a lot of people try to jump into way too quickly is their indirect expenses. People love the vanity stuff, right? They want to get a building and a facility and have trucks and fleets and, equipment and different things along those lines because they think it makes them look more professional and things along those lines, when a lot of times those are vanity things, right? Like you can rent the piece of equipment, you don't need 6 trucks, get one truck, get a nice wrap on it, like, and you can be good. And it doesn't need to be, the $80,000 truck, kind of a deal. I mean, the number of guys I see driving around with these big, way overutilized trucks when all they ever do is throw a ladder on the top and maybe a couple tools in the back of it. They're not towing or hauling, the kind of weight that you need to have, some big truck. And so, just things like that is another big thing that I see folks, not focusing on. And so, numbers that we can pull out of the financial data, but, having them pay more focused attention to just focus on these numbers, and you'll drive things forward in the right way, to ultimately impact, the bottom line in a positive way without getting them lost in the financial statements.
Yeah, definitely. So what I pulled out of that was generally like your marketing efforts and knowing, what you're spending on marketing, what it costs to acquire a client, which I think is a calculation that very few business owners typically do early on. And the reason for this is knowing where to best put your dollar, right? Like you're going to have money you're going to put into advertising without knowing how much your client costs or which avenues are doing, where you're spending money. It's easy to blow a lot of money on marketing. And like you said, there's always that time delay for effort, for time, for money when you put it in. And then, maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year later, that can pay off, depending on your marketing efforts. So very important there. And then yeah, overhead and expenses, keeping an eye on that and not making sure your burn rate is appropriate for where you're going, and having a bit of, runway so that if sales take a dip or whatever, you're going to be all right. So based off your experience, everybody makes mistakes at some point along the way, or you see mistakes, that clients make kind of repeatedly over and over. What's a mistake that you've kind of made in the past with some of your business dealings, or that you see clients make quite a bit, and how were you able to overcome it, and how would you do things differently, moving forward?
Yeah, I'll give two answers, I guess. On the client side, I think the biggest mistake that I honestly see people making is letting their ego get in the way. And the reason I say that is, the construction industry in general, right? It's very male dominated. It's a very macho industry, right? And it's full of a lot of people who don't like admitting that they're wrong, right? And so, to use a little bit of, it's the idea of like this sunk cost fallacy, right? If you know that economics term. And so it's like, I've bought this truck, or I did this thing, or I've hired too many people. And it's the like, oh, well, I've already done those things, so I can't fix those now. Like I've already committed. And so to say like, hey, I made a mistake, I was wrong, I need to, scale back on those things, is a lot of times one of the biggest things. Is just like, it's that hit to the pride, of a business owner to say like, hey, I screwed that up, I got that wrong. We've overspent, we've overextended ourselves, and we need to pull back. So on the client side, I think like that's, making the mistake, to your point, like, especially if, you maybe have been just running on your own, you didn't have coaches, mentors like yourself, helping guide somebody through, what that can look like. And then you go and you find somebody, and it's just, are they actually willing to take the action that they're being advised, to take? So that's one on the client side that probably is like, it's simple, but it's also really hard for people to do. And for me personally, I was giving this some thought in terms of like, where's the area where I've made, mistakes that I've really had to learn from. And you can kind of see from my background, there's actually, more signs there, but I'm a trail ultra runner, and I've, succumbed to injury a number of times. And one of the things that's been hard for me to like acknowledge and accept has been the fact that like my cardiovascular fitness exceeds the, muscular fitness that I have, right? And so I hate going to the gym and lifting weights and doing the things I need to do to kind of make sure that my body can withstand, what I'm putting it through, because it's I'm drawn to the running because that's what I like and I enjoy doing. So it's real easy for me to go do that form of exercise. And I completely dislike the, the weight training and things like that. So, a big part of it for me is the accountability piece behind it, right? Like I know if somebody's counting on me. And so it's been, creating those networks. So whether it's, just letting people know, hey, this is what I'm trying to go do. And therefore like being committed, and having somebody ask like, hey, did you do your workout today? And things along those lines was critical for me, just to learn kind of my own, I don't want to call it lack of self-discipline, but like I'm somebody who needs that external person holding me accountable, because, I don't necessarily, some people are great at just being like, a number of times I've heard like, oh, if you can't hold your word to yourself, then who can you hold your word to? And I'm glad that works for some people. But for me, like I'm far more likely to, when I give my word to somebody else, that's what's going to make me hold on to it, because I know somebody else is counting on me and is depending on me and has that expectation. Whereas, when it's for myself, I don't know if it's because I'm self-sacrificing, I always want to help other people or whatever it is, but like I'm just wired to give to other people over myself. And so when I know that I've got that other person there, that's really kind of been the unlock for me, is like, all right, I got to get people that are going to help support me on stuff like that. So that's the goal for this year, is to really focus on like the strength and the accountability side of it. So
yeah, no, you pinpointed it really well there. It's, as business owners and entrepreneurs, we're generally kind of flying more or less solo and can make our own decisions, and have, even though maybe we're overworked, but we at least have a flexible schedule and can decide what we do. It's very easy just to get into the day-to-day and not be staying accountable to things that you've set goals for, or that you should be doing on a regular basis, but it's easy just to kind of slough it off because you got all this other stuff going on. So really great point there. And yeah, like a coach or someone like that can definitely like help out a lot with that. or even just having a partner, another person in business or that you're close with. Me personally, besides like a coach, I have an accountability partner. We send an email once a week, my top 3 objectives this week that I want to get done. And it just keeps that top of mind and keeps you focused on like, these are the keys that are really moving my business forward. Yes, I'm going to take care of all that other stuff as I can, but it keeps the top of mind of what you should be focusing on and getting done. Yeah. So it's really important there. And then kind of jumping back to your other point there about like with, something you see clients making mistakes with, as far as like kind of ego and things like that. It can be really hard to make those tough decisions. I've been through that too, where business was slow, had some cash shortfalls, and ended up having to sell my dirt bike, which was a hard place to be, and slashing some expenses, and you get used to sort of a certain income level or lifestyle level, and it can be really hard to like kind of button down. And even though it seems like you're taking a step back, it's actually necessary in order to move forward and have like a healthier business, so that you can readjust and then get farther in the long run. So some great points there. I'm huge on systems. I love, systems and automating things and having a process. Can you share a bit about what, maybe some financial systems or financial management processes that you can suggest for clients to use, or that you help with your clients?
Yeah. So again, maybe it's a little bit of a cheat answer for me, I guess, but the financial system that I think it's super simple for anybody to implement and can have huge impacts on a business is profit first. And the reason I say that, right, is, for those that are maybe unfamiliar with profit first, at its core, what we're doing is we're prioritizing profit before our expenses. And we do that because it's a mindset, it's a psychological effect that as humans, we prioritize what we prioritize, right? And so when we put a lot of emphasis on our expenses, it drives expenses. And there's psychological, study that was basically done and observed, which is there was a study basically from the 1900s to the 2000s, the average size of a plate, has grown. I forget the number. It's something like 11.5% or something like that in North America. And as a result of that, if we consumed an extra 50 calories a day, which is like nothing, if you actually were to go look up what 50 calories is, the average person would gain 5 pounds a year. Right. And that's exactly what has happened if you look at like historical like weights as well. Right. And the interesting thing is psychologically, we do the exact same thing with our money. And so if you have your money sitting all on one big plate, psychologically, you think, oh, I have all of this money, and then you just end up start spending it because it's there and you can. But if you take that same amount of money and you break it out into smaller plates, and in Profit First, we allocate it out into specific bank accounts. And when you do that, psychologically as business owners, again, we're not wired to go, oh, let me go check my spreadsheet, or let me go check my P&L or my balance sheet and see how much money I have, or how much am I budgeted in this category. That's not how we're wired. That's not what we do. What we do is we pull up our phone, we go on our app, and we see, do I have the money in the bank account, to go and spend money on this thing or not? And when you have, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in a bank account, your brain doesn't process all the things that money is already pre-allocated to. You just go, oh yeah, I've got plenty, and you spend it. And so when we psychologically separate all of that and we actually put money into different things, and when I check this bank account, that's the money I have to spend on something, and it's a lot smaller than the total amount of cash you maybe have in your business that's been allocated to be spent on other things, you actually start to question better what to spend money on. And it's just that simple process of, it's that double check of like, okay, yep, that's the money that's there. That's what it's allocated for. Do I have enough? Yes, no. And then, if you start going outside of that, that's a red flag for you to know, like, hey, I'm cheating on my system, my process, and therefore something is broken and I need to do something differently. So it's not anything crazy fancy. It's real simple and easy to use and implement. But to your point, one of the biggest things where people fail with Profit First is that lack of accountability. Because it's like, oh, it's like cheating on your diet. It's like, oh, like I can do a little bit here, I can do a little bit there. It's not that big of a deal. But those behaviors really compound themselves.
For sure. But yeah, there's a number of great reasons to use a profit first system. And, I use it personally for my business as well. But yeah, like you said, having those allocations, and I think that's where a lot of business owners run into trouble is, you've got one bank account, maybe a credit card or what have you, and you're not realizing that there's a percentage that's going to go to overhead. There's a percentage that's going to go to profits. There's a percentage that's going to go to taxes and all those things. And it's real easy to run into financial issues because you don't really know. It's so easy to take money for expenses, not realizing that, hey, end of the year, you got to pay taxes, or you've got, this expense or that one. So yeah, great way to see where things are at without having to dive into and have perfect bookkeeping or perfect accounting and all that stuff. Can you talk a little bit more about the profit first system, how you take a client who's, maybe has one bank account or two bank accounts and kind of get them on the system and get it working effectively for them?
Yeah. So again, where it starts for a lot of people come to profit first because they don't feel like their business is generating the profits that they want, right? And more often than not, it really does start from the perspective of, in the vast majority of cases, the person is overspending in their business, right? So the first thing that we really do is, we go through the exercise of what I would kind of call bringing the horse to water and seeing if they want to drink, right? Mm-hmm. And so we go through an expense analysis, activity, that basically says, okay, here's where I think your expenses should be based on the size and complexity of your business, right? And again, there's over 600 profit first professionals around the world. So again, tens of thousands of businesses at this point are running profit first. So at what we call profit first home base, which is kind of the corporate entity from Mike Michalowicz that supports all of us profit first professionals, they've got a lot of data. And so that data is what really says like, hey, here's what these percentages should be in ideal businesses. And so we go through that, and it's, kind of an eye-opening thing because they're going like, oh, well, I have to have this. I have to have this. I have to have this. And it's kind of this, they're making all these excuses for why they have to have things. And it really kind of boils down to like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Right. And it's like, will your business stop tomorrow, if you don't have this expense in your business? And so setting up the bank accounts is what I want to call the easy part, especially if you're in the US. Nowadays, there's Relay Bank, which is the official banking partner of Profit First. And again, it's a fully online bank. You can literally open up bank accounts. I think you can have like up to 20 bank accounts. There's no minimum fees. There's no, it's super easy to get set up, right? Moving money back and forth is real easy. You can set up like Profit First rules. So there's all rules within Profit First on how allocations and the percentages all work. And, unlike a traditional bank where you can transfer dollar percentages across or dollar amounts, in Relay, you can do percentages that happen on certain days and a lot of things like that. So nowadays, honestly, like the bank account setup is the easy part to get people working with. Sometimes, again, if they're using a different accountant or a tax person, there's maybe a little bit of making them understand that, okay, just because we're creating more bank accounts doesn't actually multiply the transactions too much, because a lot of those bank accounts, honestly, they either get zeroed out or they have very minimal activity in them. But it's a little bit of a mindset change for folks. And so, but the act of doing it, but really a lot of the heavy lifting and the emotional stuff goes through the journey of that expense analysis and having people realize how bloated their expenses are. Every once in a while, you get the business owner who is honestly they're paying themselves so much money that they're not able to grow because they're sucking all the life out of their business and they're not actually leaving anything in. So there are the rare occasions where you got to have that conversation with the business owner that's like, hey, if you want your business to grow, you're actually pulling out more than you should from the business. And that's why there's nothing left over for the business to grow. And so sometimes it turns a little bit into like a personal finance budgeting kind of conversation of why are you pulling so much out? And does your personal lifestyle really need all of that, compared to what your longer term business objectives are? And so then we talk about, reducing, owner's compensation, a little bit, so that we can have profit to reinvest in the business, making them understand if we can grow the business, then that can have a greater impact on your financial situation further down the road, but you got to make that short-term trade-off. So those are the two journeys, that we take people on, but most of the time it's the expenses being pretty hefty.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for sharing that and clarifying kind of, how the system works, and yeah, just the different journeys that people can go on and how they can get control of their finances, whether that's, business finances or personal finances, where things could be tightened up or readjusted, that will kind of enable you to take off some of that burden or roadblock of over expenses and enable you to grow larger and healthier with less risk in the future. So that's awesome. Can you tell me about maybe the best piece of advice that you've received? Could be financial, like with what you do, or just in business in general, but a great piece of advice that you received and how you applied it.
Yeah. So this is one of those interesting ones where the best advice I ever got was actually the worst advice. And what I mean by that is, when I had my very first leadership role was at Amazon. And so it was, brand new leader leading a group of folks. And I was struggling to lead my team. And I had somebody from HR, give me some guidance that, and I don't remember the exact wording, but it was something to the extent of, when you come to work, you need to be a chameleon, and you need to put on a mask, and you need to put on a face of what they want you to be, versus who you actually are. And that was advice that I really struggled with for a long time, because it felt very inauthentic. I was very uncomfortable. If you haven't noticed, I talk a lot. I talk with my hands, right? I'm a very expressive individual, and I have learned to listen better over time. And it's something I'm still actively working on. But there was a lot of just like, I'm a very analytically minded person. And so there's a lot of interpersonal stuff that I struggled with and different things like that. And it took me a long time to be able to realize and acknowledge, that advice. It grinded me down, and it made me not enjoy a lot of what I was doing and not enjoy my life. I wasn't enjoying the work, my people, leading the team. And when I eventually realized that it wasn't about me needing to be great at everything, but understanding where my weaknesses and my deficiencies were, and instead of trying to get better at those, finding somebody who was really good at those things to support me, because there's other people who can't stand doing the things that I'm really good at, right? And then there's other people who love doing those things. And so it was more about being more open and transparent as a leader to say, here's who I am, here's what my flaws are, here's what I can do. In order to be an effective leader, here's what I need from you, right? And having it be more of a two-way dialogue, and being able to build out that team of I don't need to be sitting at the top and dictating down what's going on. My job is to create the environment that everybody can thrive the most in, and play whatever supportive role I need to play for everybody, within that situation. And so it was that advice. And as I tried to take it and realize it wasn't for me, that I eventually kind of figured out. And that was one of the biggest unlocks for me to really grow as a leader, was when I realized that maybe that advice works for some people. And I truly do believe that some of the absolute best leaders out there truly have that ability to kind of be that chameleon, right? To be super authoritative leader when they need to be, and a very compassionate leader, and listen sometimes, and then be directive at other times. And the leaders that can do that, are on a different level than me. I'm not going to claim to be at that position. So, but I think that's a rare person who has that level of skills as a leader. And so it was just, hey, I still need to lead my people. This is the best way that I can do it. And I became a much better leader when I learned that about myself, and then how to start cultivating the team around me.
Yeah, very interesting perspective and, advice and feedback there. And getting back even before what you said about, ego and how that can be a roadblock for people, especially in the construction industry, or generally hard-headed, and you're dealing with a lot of, knuckleheads and a lot of different stuff going on. But having that humble approach where, you're not perfect at everything. There are, weaknesses. You don't have to fix all of them, but your team and the people around you can help support that, and just recognizing that, very, staying staying humble and stuff like that. And, you've got it right on your shirt, our team accounting, where it's the team that needs to be strong. You can hire people, you can work with people to shore up different aspects of the team, and you don't have to be perfect for everybody. And that is a part of leadership, as well as being able to realize that you're not perfect, and not going to have be the big chameleon, like you said, and you still got to have a personality and feel comfortable being yourself in situations. So really great advice there. Finally, can you tell us about a success story of a client, of maybe like where they started, how you helped them, and maybe some of the key steps to kind of getting them to the success of working with you?
Yeah. As I think through, the clients, so as I mentioned, I acquired my business, a year ago. So from a profit first journey perspective, the majority of my clients are still very early on, kind of going through the process of that conversion. But, from just on the accounting side of things, from a team perspective, one of the things that we've been really good and really successful with a number of our clients is actually when, it's very easy to basically get wrapped up again in just running the business. And a lot of times people, leave the finances kind of by the wayside, and as a result of that, they tend to not file their taxes because they know that they don't have good information, good data, whatever you want to kind of call it. And so they're like, well, I don't have nothing's to put together, and so I can't file. And we've had a number of clients that are 2, 3, 4 years plus behind on their taxes, where we've had to go in and roll up our sleeves and basically build out their accounts from years back, right? And so it's a collaborative effort. My firm, we don't do taxes. And so, we're definitely getting some guidance from their tax professionals, because when it comes back to expense coding from 4 years ago, I don't remember entirely what that was for, right? Is what the owner is usually going to say. And so we try to take cues and things like that as best we can. But, again, when you can walk somebody through kind of hey, here's where you were, to, here's where you are and what it can look like going forward. And then start those conversations around okay, now that we know what's going on, let's actually start some of these forward-looking conversations. How can we use the data to plan the business and plan what's going on and look at what's happening? Because when you don't have that information, to be frank, a lot of these businesses, I don't mean this in any sort of negative way, but they're being run very quote unquote old school, and by the owner's gut, of just oh yeah, these are the numbers, and I know the numbers and they're in my head, and I feel this way. But it's a rough way for a lot of them to kind of do things, and it creates a lot of chaos in their organization, because a lot of times if their books are that way, then so are their systems, so is their culture, because they're so used to just being in reaction mode, is a lot of what we've observed. You need to get them to that place of okay, we can actually start building things now that aren't reliant on you being at the center of everything in your business. Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. And as, captain business owner, just taking care of everything, but, and kind of making keeping the wheels moving, but not realizing that you need a bit of oil and maintenance, and, kind of take that first step of catching up and getting things, clean and organized in order to take that next step forward. So that's awesome. James, what's the best way for people to connect with you, connect with your team, learn more about you and your services?
Yeah. So to connect with me, probably the best place to do that is on Facebook. So if you just jump on Facebook and look for James Masotti, you'll see my ugly mug if you're seeing this on Facebook. So I'm kind of easy to find there. And I think I signed up for Facebook pretty early on, when it was exclusive to colleges, and you had to have a .edu email address and stuff. So I'm pretty sure my actual name on Facebook is just James Masotti. So it's pretty easy to find. In terms of my team, our website is ourteamaccounting.com. So OURTEAM accounting.com. So you can kind of learn a lot about us there. If you're interested specifically in Profit First, then if you go to ourteamaccounting.com/Profit First School, and that's technically school, SKOOL, but if you spell it either way, you'll get to the same place. But we've got a free community on School, which is a great platform for, again, we're building out some educational content in terms of helping folks to learn more about Profit First. There's some free resources on there that we're building out, but that's a great place to kind of go have some community, be around other like-minded business owners. We've got just about 200 people in the community right now. So again, would love to grow that. And that's a great place to, again, kind of just engage with us specifically around Profit First stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely. We'll drop some links in the description here to the video or podcast episode, depending where you're listening from. And yeah, definitely connect with those resources, educate yourself, connect with James and his team to help you out. Thanks so much, James, for coming on here. Really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, Derek, I really appreciate you making the time for me.